I'm Leah Lane, an award-winning travel writer and author of Places I Remember, Tales, Truths, Delights from 100 Countries. On this podcast, we share conversations with travelers about fascinating destinations and memorable experiences around the world. Countless wildlife films have been recorded on the grassy plains of the Serengeti in Tanzania, East Africa, and with good reason. This is the home of the great migration of wildebeest and one of the natural wonders on planet Earth. Serengeti National Park is a World Heritage Site close to 15,000 square kilometers, teeming with millions of wild animals. If you've been lucky enough to have traveled to the Serengeti, you understand the magic. You can take a land vehicle to follow a pride of lions or soar over the plains at sunrise on a hot air balloon safari to watch herds on the move. And if you haven't gone, there's another way to experience that magic. Our guests today are Emmy winner Simon Fuller, producer of American Idol and So You Think You Can Dance, and John Downer, Emmy-winning wildlife documentary filmmaker. Simon is the creator and producer, John the director and producer of the documentary series Serengeti, available on Discovery Plus, now in its sixth-part second season, Serengeti 2. The documentary captures beauty as well as brutality and the daily challenges of life and death during a year on the Serengeti Plains. You see these wonders up close, dramatizing the life cycles of the animals from different angles, seeing and understanding them in a way you never otherwise could. Welcome, Simon and John.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Simon, for much of your super successful career, you focused on pop culture. You were even manager of the Spice Girls. What inspired you to join with John in producing this documentary series?
Well, I mean, you mentioned pop culture, and that's something I'm really, really interested in. And I think in the epicenter of pop culture right now is people's interest in nature and concern about the environment. And so I was very drawn to it. And I personally love nature, love my animals. And of course, as any human should be right now, pretty concerned with the environment. And I was just really wanting to do a show that kind of had a different take on nature. And I had this idea of, I think humans as a species, we're a little arrogant and we think we have the answers to everything. And I tend to believe that maybe the answers to everything comes from nature. And I was wondering how I could create a show that kind of presented nature in a different way that was more relatable to the viewer. And so we saw these lives through the eyes of the animals as opposed to the human. And as we sat on our sofas, we might relate better to the animals and understand that their existence actually isn't too different to ours. Yeah, and I had this idea while on safari in Tanzania. And I was so excited about it. And the more I thought about it, the more excited I became. And then I had this dawning realization that I don't know how to film animals. I'm not an expert in the field. I'm passionate about it as a human, and I could understand how it could be successful, but I needed a partner. And to cut a long story short, I did my research pretty thoroughly, and one name kept coming up over and over again as to someone who was best of the best. And it was this gentleman called John Downer, who I didn't know. I knew him by name, and we actually have some history together, which we'd probably both forgotten. But I tracked him down and phoned him up and said, John, I've got an idea. I'd love to meet with you and discuss it. So I flew to London to the Connaught Hotel, which is my favorite hotel in London. And we met in one of those beautiful two bars they have. And John arrived coming from Bristol. And I said, look, you may think I'm crazy, but this is the idea. I started talking for about 30 seconds and John said, this is brilliant. I completely agree with you. There's a massive idea here. I think ever since then, we have the perfect relationship, and he's the genius that captures all those wonderful shots. And I contribute what I believe is a relatable journey for this show to hopefully touch more and more people.
Yes, you're a terrific combo. John, you're an award-winning documentarian. You've done wildlife features on gorillas and penguins and so forth. What were some of the biggest challenges directing Serengeti and Serengeti 2?
Well, we were going to tell a story. I mean, as Simon said, when we met up, we discussed it. But what was so brilliant is that kind of where my filmmaking was going and the kind of things I was thinking about were exactly what Simon was talking about. And what was absolutely perfect for this, because, I have told dramatic stories, dramas in the animal world, but this was something else. And the wonderful thing was, I've always been interested in the technology that takes you into the animal world, that you can see what life is like from the inside. But the technology was just about to take this quantum leap into whole different areas, doing what used to be really difficult. Still is difficult, but the technology is there to achieve it, because a lot of the things I wanted to do, with the cameras and positioning the cameras, were impossible before or really hard. So I had this array of amazing camera devices at my disposal. We tested them for about 6 weeks in the Serengeti to find out, what was really delivering without disturbing the animals and would allow us multiple viewpoints on the same event. You have to have in a drama. You can't just rely on, a long shot or whatever. You need those cutaways. You need those emotional shots, picking up the reactions of the animals. I suddenly had this toolkit to play with and some amazing talent, camera talent, and a lot of young people as well who were anxious to try new things, not what is normally seen in conventional documentary. So they kind of grabbed this idea and they ran with it. And, they needed obviously some careful direction in terms of, what stories we were telling and how we were going to tell them. But they, put in the hard slog, 14 hours days or even longer, to capture the amazing material and capture it from multiple viewpoints. So there was each camera team had multiple cameras and ways of capturing imagery, but we had also multiple teams and they could come together or go apart or whatever. So that was quite unique, and it was the perfect timing for something so, ambitious as this.
Well, as a dramatized story of real animals, we empathize with their lives. We root for them. We laugh with them. We mourn with them. We hope for them, and we get to know them. There's an especially moving storyline of elephants mourning the loss of a mother and a sister, and there's a love triangle among baboons. I mean, it's just very special in that respect. How long did it take to capture all of these?
Well, that was just under 2 years, which was extraordinary. I mean, most wildlife films, they take 3 years minimum, sometimes take 4. We had to condense the whole process, but this is what I was saying about, multiple camera teams, multiple cameras to capture enough behavior. And it was, the storylines were born out of the reality of the animals' lives. And so, we had a lot of incredible material to draw on. And if you take that incredible scene, of those mourning elephants, no one's seen anything like that.
No, it was spectacular.
We know about elephants will mourn. And, I filmed, some mourning scenes before, the interest in the bones or whatever. But this was on another level. And that congregation of elephants together has never been filmed. And, those sort of things you can't write into the story. You can't write and expect to capture them. So you're guided by the incredible behavior that you capture. And that becomes part of the ongoing storyline. I mean, that's what makes me so excited about this concept. It allows us to capture the extraordinary and weave it into a story that people can relate to, that informs the life of the animals that we're featuring in a way you can't do with conventional natural history documentary.
Right. The documentary is sometimes graphic, but not in an exploitative way. It does show fighting and it shows kills and loss, but also love. And I was worried when I watched it. I hate to see, a tough kill, but it was done beautifully. I felt the natural pace of it. I didn't feel offended or frightened by it. I think for children, would you consider this, even for young children, a series that they could watch?
I would. I think that's very important. And I always try and make films that are suitable for a family. I think it's important that children see the reality of life out there. We're very careful how we edit it, not to make it graphic, but we don't shy away from it because that's the reality of the life that's out there. And so we're really cautious, particularly if it's a character that we've grown to love, how we handle any of those moments of death because of those human sensibilities.
Yeah, I felt that sensitivity all the way through this, which I really appreciated as a viewer who loves animals. It was real, but it was sensitive. On episode 6 of this podcast, I talked with Paul Barracote, the CEO of the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, and he emphasized that, quote, life thrives, but it has to move. How does this movement play out in the documentary?
Well, it's moving all the time, and that's what we're showing. It's not. You could look at the Serengeti and say the animals within it, the lions, the baboons, or whatever, they're just going to go through the same old routine through the seasons. And although the first one was seasonally driven, the second wasn't. And most of the elements we captured that were the central storylines were not what anyone expects, mainly because animals are so adaptable. They do not go out in, as I was taught when I was doing zoology, pretty much that they were programmed to do things. They're not. They're sentient beings responding to the problems that life throws at them. And the more you spend time with animals, you realize how adaptable and sensitive they are. And therefore, that's where the empathy happens, because you can understand. So much of it is like, well, that's just like us. And that is really important. And what was really important on this one, and took us totally by surprise and totally changed the storyline, was the storm and the floods. And that has happened because of climate change. Something so far away that was causing fires in Australia was causing, the hugest rainfall in Africa and flooding the very animals that we were filming. But then if you see it, you see them struggle, but you see them in the end thrive, or most of them to thrive because of their adaptability. They find a way through. That's where I think hope lies if we give them a chance.
Yes.
So that all became quite important part of that storyline.
It's a good lesson for us. Now, a vulture flies overhead throughout the series, looking quite beautiful in the air, but a constant reminder of the fragility of life. John, I know you pioneered techniques for wildlife filmmaking, in particular putting cameras on birds and filming them from the air using various filming platforms. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I've tried every technique. As you say, I've filmed. I made one of my first films I ever made was about bird flight. So I was really interested in that viewpoint in terms of how we get it, how we use it. And it became emblematic, really, of an overview. It was almost the voice of the Serengeti, but it wasn't. It wasn't ever stated what it was. But it had that feeling of being up there with them, and also their role, what their role is within the Serengeti, because it's very easy to compartmentalize animals into goodies and baddies. The baddies kill things and they scavenge things and all that. What was important there was to, give them quite a big role that was sensitive to that role, and vultures are in quite a few places endangered. And so that became, they're not these horrible beings. They can be, but they're trying to survive to the animal that, they might be confronting over the kill, but it was trying to use it in a way that hadn't been used before, and also to give presence to those animals.
Yes, I noted that. It was good. With Serengeti 2, Simon and John welcomed their entire team back from the first series, including composer Will Gregory and Oscar-winning actress Lupita Nyong'o, who has lived in Kenya as the storyteller. We're used to male narrators. Simon, how do you think Lupita's voiceover affects the documentary?
I mean, I absolutely love her voice. As you say, historically, we're far more used to males. I'm not quite sure how that happened. For me, and I know John agreed, the female perspective is very important, to someone who isn't the expert that John is. It was a little surprising for me in some ways to see how the role of the female in Serengeti, in nature generally, is quite different to how people might imagine it. And, and I think that the sort of empathy that a show like this really, at the heart of Serengeti is empathy. And I think that mother's view, that matriarch perspective just adds, to me, more emotional weight to everything. So I absolutely love Lupita. She's sensational in every way. I mean, I've just watched her as John and her go through the scripts. It's just so elegant, and she adds something to everything. And and having come from Kenyan heritage, her father still lives there. It has authenticity. So it ticks so many boxes, and I don't think we could have wished for anyone better than Lupita.
Yeah, she is wonderful. It's a wonderful voiceover. I agree. Will there be a Serengeti 3?
Yes, of course.
Yay!
Of course there will be. Yes. We have some very, very exciting plans coming, which I'm probably not allowed to share with you. But John and I has turned out to be one of the best partnerships. There's plenty more coming from us. Certainly
I have
series
to
3.
agree with Simon on that. It's been, it's two-way. I couldn't have wished for a better partner. It's extraordinary that we've come from very different directions, but in the same way, all we want to do is to bring things to a large audience and involve them and inspire them. But the partnership between us has been really unbreakable, and it's been fantastic. And we never disagree, or rarely disagree. If we do disagree, we find a common solution, and it's a perfect partnership.
Well, I think it shows in your work.
Yeah, I was just enjoying listening to you ask John questions. I was sitting there thinking, great, I heard this before, but I love listening just to the two of you talk. So that's how good our partnership is.
That's so sweet. Well, the name of the podcast is Places I Remember. So I'll ask each of you to please share one special personal memory about your experience of the Serengeti. John, do you want to start?
I suppose, I have so many, but I suppose the most pertinent to this is that, Simon said he'd found this, wonderful place, and, the Serengeti, and it was Serengeti reserves, and he'd stayed there. And he said, you should go there, and got me on a flight to go there and see what it's really about. And it was beautiful. But I know Serengeti so well, so I wasn't expecting it to be wow. And that's what I felt when I went there. And I think it's a little bit about everywhere in the Serengeti. It is a special place, and you immediately feel at one with the animals when you go to these places. And that's what I felt then. And it kind of rekindled my love of Africa, because I hadn't been for quite a long time. Although I've been many, many times, but not recently. And so it was a wonderful moment to say, yes, this is where I want to be. And then know that we're going to make something special, from that place.
That's wonderful. Simon, what about your special memory?
For me, the special memory, this sort of part 1 and part 2. The part 1 was I've been to Africa many, many times, to many different countries, and a great number of wonderful trips and safaris. There was one trip where I actually went specifically to just recharge my batteries and to think about projects in my career. And that was the trip where I came up with the idea of Serengeti. So that was obviously profound and important. But the part 2 to that was that I got to take my 3 young daughters there after Serengeti had broadcast, or as we were making it at least, and shared the wonder of that beautiful part of the world with them. And so to see them see an elephant in the wild and a lion and all the many, many beautiful creatures we saw, to see their reaction to it for the first time. They were 5 or actually they were younger. They were 3.5 and 8.5 at the time. Nothing will ever beat that for me. That's the memory I would take to my grave. It was just the innocence of young humans and the innocence of nature meeting, and that purity and the love. No, it wasn't fear, actually. It was just awe. It was just, that will be a memory I will last forever and ever.
Thank you so much for those. And thank you both, Simon Fuller and John Downer, Emmy Award-winning producers of the documentary series Serengeti and Serengeti 2, available for streaming on Discovery Plus. We appreciate what you've created, and I highly recommend experiencing this magnificent presentation of nature without having to travel beyond your armchair. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to our award-winning podcast. We've recorded over 100 episodes of Places I Remember, so follow us on any podcast app. And new monthly episodes are also on YouTube with gorgeous video. My book, Places I Remember, is available in print and Kindle, and I read the audio version. Follow my travel writing at Forbes.com. Contact me at the links in the show notes or on my website, placesirememberlealane.com, and keep making your own travel memories.